Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for our second episode in the Coping with Dog Loss series. We're truly delighted to have you here today, and we're so delighted to have Peggy Haymes back with us. Say hi, Peggy.
Thank you. Good to be back.
She's got lots of great insights and tips and all kinds of good information for our We Heart Hounds family. We're so happy to have her back. Thank you last week for putting up with Hillary and I without without her, but we're delighted she's back to provide some good information for everybody. She's just an amazing grief coach who's helped so many people overcome the loss of grief and move towards a path of healing. So we're excited to have her back. Just as a little bit of background, if you're new to the series, Hillary and I have put together this 5-part short sessions kind of series that take place here every Thursday at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to be talking about the various topics around grief and the loss of your dog. And in case you'd like to watch the replays, you can always go to the videos tab. There's a section on the We Heart Hounds page that's called videos. You can always click on that. And we've kind of organized our videos so that you can jump right into the series and watch the replay, or you can always go and check us out on our YouTube channel. We'll be sure to add links to all of that good stuff in the replay once that's done. And as a friendly reminder, I just want to stop for a minute and ask that if you could, please participate. We really would love to have your insights, your experience. We really think it's going to be a huge benefit. The more everyone opens up to the discussions, the greater we all benefit from it. I totally get it. If you just want to listen in, you're so welcome to just do that. We're really happy to have you here. I know it's a difficult topic to talk about, but the more that we open up, the more that we share some of the sad things, but also some of the things that you've done to move through the grief and towards healing, that's going to be so huge for all of us to learn from. So we encourage you to do that. And then if we find that these sessions are meaningful to you, then that's something that helps us know that maybe this should be a series that's extended beyond the 5-part that we've put together at this point. So, all right, now that all the housekeeping and introductory stuff is out of the way, I'm going to turn it over to Hillary, and Hillary, you can go ahead and we'll just go ahead and get started.
All right, sounds great. So, hi everyone. I do have some notes in front of me so I can kind of stay on track with our discussion today. But today's topic is dealing with the feelings of guilt around dog loss, and that's such a guilt can be such a heavy and big emotion that we did kind of put together a list of things that we wanted to touch on throughout this particular discussion because it's just, guilt's a big one. It's, there's a lot to cover there. And one of the first things in our list is the feeling of guilt that can be associated around euthanasia. So if you've had to experience that or go through that, some of the feelings of guilt that can accompany that. And Peggy, would you like a little bit more on that guilt around euthanasia topic?
Sure. It's one of the gifts that we have with our dogs, but also one of the really tough things is that sometimes we have to make that call. And one of the things that makes it hard is the dog cannot tell us, okay, I'm ready, let me go now, or I'm cool, I'm not in too much pain, I can hang out for a little while longer with you guys. We can't have those conversations. And it's not like a straight line trajectory, so that, you may have a really bad day. It's okay, tomorrow's the day. And then you get up and the dog is perkier.
Mm-hmm.
Well, should I, maybe not. And I think all of us who really love our dogs have this fear that we're either going to do it too soon or we're going to hold on for too long. Necessarily. suffering. And so the guilt of questioning ourselves, did I do it right? Did I do it at the right time? Should I have done it? Some people want to be there with their dogs. I've always been there with my pets. Some people just can't do that. And so there's guilt about, oh, I should have done this differently. Mm-hmm. Or, I read a magazine where somebody came to their home and had it done. It was this perfect day, and I couldn't do that. We're at the emergency vets. So it becomes this terrible weight of second guessing ourselves.
Right. Well, and even I know, some of the folks that have listened in have talked about how they relive that moment again and again, even with the reassurance from the vet that, their dog isn't feeling any pain, that this is, the right time or, and all that. I know after losing Clover, most recently, you do start, well, you have the decisiveness or, obviously nobody knows for sure, but to the best of your ability, you make the best decision for the time and you feel, I'll say, as good as you can about it. But then the next day or the next few days or that's when you start like the second guessing, that really it can really spiral down into a lot of guilt and trying to figure out, could something have, if I had caught something sooner, then, trying to think about all the things that you could do to have changed the outcome of that moment or that time.
Yeah,
it's tough.
And I want to touch on something you said about being the dog's last moments or last days. And of course, those are the last pictures we have of them. That's the last video in our heads. And that's why it's important after a dog has died to spend some time sharing the stories. What was that first day at home like? How did you come up with the name? What was the dog's favorite games? When did they chew up all your shoes? And as you share those stories and look back at those pictures, what happens is you gradually, you don't get rid of that last picture, but you fill other pictures. So that's not the only thing that you're thinking about.
Right. It's almost like changing the story in your head because that last moment is so intense that's almost all you can focus on for a while. But then if you start filling it with different stories, different moments, different, happier moments, then your brain has a way of kind of retelling that story of that last day so that it's not quite as hard.
Yeah, just a brief little bit about our brains is that whenever in our brains gets stronger, that connection gets stronger. So if you're playing that last day, those last moments, that last breath, it's going to be easier to think that connection gets strengthened in our brain. It just becomes like a default setting. It becomes easier to think it. So as you start really consciously shifting your thoughts to this is a puppy, or this is when we found her at the rescue, or whatever, the more you focus on those stories, the easier it's going to be for them to become the default. Since you
Sorry, Peggy.
did I lose you?
Yeah, it looks like we cut out just a little bit. But yeah, I can.
I tell you, if you guys can, one moment here, I need to slip in and out, change my connection.
Okay, that sounds good.
And I think it'll get connection.
That would be great. No problem. I know for me with Clover, I think one of the things that also helped was not just reliving memories that had gone by, but also considering the fact that if we hadn't, euthanized her when we did, the suffering just would have grown. It would have just been more difficult and more painful for her. It just would have, and that was something that we couldn't live with, right? I mean, that was
Yeah.
the last thing you want to do is have your dog. So Peggy, I was just mentioning, not just talking about past moments and happier times, but also just coming to terms with the fact that even though it was a difficult decision, it really was the right decision to make, because otherwise we would have extended her suffering, and that was the last thing that we wanted to do, especially when she was even diagnosed with cancer. Initially, our first thought was she's not going into chemo, because you think about, people in chemo and their hair goes out and they lose their appetite and they're just miserable for months and months. And we were like, we don't want to extend her life just for our selfish needs of having her here, if that means she's just going to be miserable on chemo for forever. And it was the same thing with the last day. And if you can look at it as a way of giving that as a gift, I'm sorry.
Yes.
It's so important, I think, to think of it that way. Because it's not an easy decision to make, but it really is a heroic decision to make, I think.
It is the most loving gift we can give them, for them not to have to continue to suffer.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So anybody here? Hi, Christine. It's great to have you here. And Al, it's great to see you. Just real quick, has anyone else felt, the same kind of guilt around euthanasia and having to go through that? And if so, how did that make you feel? What are the things that you talked about in your head or to others that helped you get through it? Or if you're still trying to get through it, what are the things that you're struggling with? We'd love to hear from you on that. And I know it takes a moment for those comments and statements to come in. So we'll kind of keep going here as we wait, but I'll check in as you guys are commenting, and we can bring them up as they come in. So obviously euthanasia is probably the biggie of feeling guilt. What are some other things, Peggy, do you think that are, that people are struggling with in terms of feeling guilt about the loss of their dog?
Well, one thing that's connected with euthanasia is when you have to make a decision based on finances.
Oh, sure.
When the vet comes in and says, hey, we could maybe, get this dog in remission, or we might be able to buy a couple of years here, but the treatment's so expensive and you just don't have the money.
Right, right.
You can get shaming from other people saying, well, I'd sell my house if it was me. And,
right.
Sometimes we just have those constraints, and
right.
people can feel terribly guilty.
Right. Or even life circumstances. So, for example, with Clover, her chemo treatments weekly or every other week. I mean, I can imagine the amount of time people would have to take off of work or find additional care, somebody to be with her after the treatments because she's recovering, from the chemicals and the medication and all that. I mean, it's totally. We're not superhuman. We can't always do everything we want to. So it would be awful for anyone to make them feel guilt, or anyone to feel guilt themselves about a situation where they don't have that that kind of control.
I think sometimes too, you can feel guilt, like we can find guilt where there wasn't any intended. So it can be kind of a passing comment where it feels heavy to us, or it feels like, oh, that's a judgment, or I should, because you're already second guessing. So just kind of being gentle with yourself and with those comments that normally wouldn't trigger that guilt, but that it can kind of compound because you're already pretty fragile at that
Right.
time. You're already second guessing yourself. So things that people say can really kind of hit you differently than they would normally.
Right.
It's like when you got a bruise on your arm and somebody can jostle you, and normally it wouldn't hurt at all. But because you have that bruised place, it's like, oh, that really hurt.
Yep.
Yeah, that extra sensitivity. So, Christine, thanks so much for reaching out with your comment. So, Christine says her feelings of guilt are not around recognizing or catching her dog Daisy's illness sooner, even though I'm sorry. Her feelings of guilt are around not recognizing or catching Daisy's illness sooner, even though her liver mass was something that didn't seem to show symptoms until just a few days before her death. So the decision to let her go was indeed a privilege and a responsibility. But I'm sure, I know we had the same feelings with Clover's cancer. You know, you feel a huge lump that wasn't there, 2 or 3 days before. And you're wondering, how did I miss that? Could I have caught it sooner? What could I have done differently? And you end up beating yourselves up over not
That's
finding it.
similar to what happened with Tatum, which for us, she had a tumor that we removed a year earlier, and it wasn't the same cancer that came back later, but we had a really good year after, completely
Mm-hmm.
cancer free and healthy and great. And then she started feeling, I could tell she was sick, but it was literally days. And the mass that they found was that it wasn't going to be something that was, she was beyond the point of having it treatable. So I definitely understand you know, it was so sudden and in a way not sudden at the same time. But
Yeah.
there is a part of you that always like, I'm grateful to the fact that we could make the decision and knew it was the right decision. But there is that second guessing of like, oh, was there something I missed? Should I have caught this sooner? Is definitely in the back of your mind. And
Yeah.
that's a hard one to get away from. I try to remember, I try to be grateful for that really healthy, happy year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really grateful also for the vet that we had, that when we actually did have to make that decision, how supportive they were. So that was one of the ways that I could kind of find something in this horrible situation to kind of latch on to, that was the little beam of light in
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that helped me through.
Yeah.
And I think when you're in the midst of this, and part of that second guessing is just normal. It's like the bargaining phase of grief of, if I had done something different, this wouldn't have happened, which makes us feel like we have control. And if we
Yeah.
just get right next time, it won't happen, and we won't have
Right.
to deal with it.
Right.
But as it goes on, or as it really hurts us, the second guessing is to remember that what happened on that last day, or in that last week, or in that last month, that doesn't negate all of the love and the care that
Yeah.
you gave to that dog for as long as you had them. It doesn't cancel it out.
Yeah. That's a really important point, Peggy. Thank you. Yeah, that's huge. And we think about, we got Clover when we think she was about 4. She had the roughest life, and when we lost her, only having her for about 2.5 or so years, we thought, well, that's not fair, right? Like, she had such a rough start, and then she gets cancer for the last 8 months, and has to go through all of that, and then we lose her. She has such a short life. But then if you think about those 2.5 years or more with us, were probably her best years ever. So, and to feel like we were able to do that for her is, it really does help some of the guilt that you feel go through all of this. I know with our first dog, Daisy, some of the guilt was that we felt, or that I felt, was kind of a relief, a sense of relief. I felt guilty because she died of old age. She lived a long, spoiled 16 and a half years. But her last 3 years were really tough. Her health was going down. There wasn't anything that was keeping her from wagging her tail, but and she was still interested and engaged and all that with life. But there'd be moments or times where she wasn't interested in the food we were giving, so we'd have to cook or find new foods, or she would one day she would like the food, and the next day I'd have to hand feed her, and then she'd gobble it up from my hand, but she wouldn't eat it out of the bowl. Or we were up, you know, three and four times in the middle of the night because she's having accidents in the house, or for whatever reason. And after 3 long years of giving her all kinds of medications and all of that stuff, just the sense of I don't have to do that anymore, then you start to feel, oh my God, that's an awful thing to feel, because I'd much rather be going through all of that still and still have her here, right? But kind of that sense of relief is just it's an ugly guilt to place on yourself for that.
That's really just kind of a normal both and. You miss your dog tremendously and would give anything to have her back, even with the trail of poop in the house and what
yeah
it do. And it's a relief, and your life is easier now. You don't have to worry about rushing home. You don't have to worry about the meds.
Right.
Both of those things can be true at the same time. And I think that's what's hard. We sometimes feel like it has to be one or the other, but both of them can be true.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. I like how you phrase that, using the word and not or. It really does open up and expand your heart to like that it's okay to feel relief. Because it was hard, that was a lot of work. That was a lot of care. It was a lot of effort. And it's normal to take a deep breath and relax for a moment. So hi, Becky. Thank you so much for joining us. Becky's added a comment here. Let's see. She says, our first boy died suddenly from an internal bleed. While we didn't have to make the choice to let him go, my husband and I were both racked with guilt for months for not knowing that there was something wrong until it was too late. We logically knew that there was nothing we could do that we could have done, but emotionally we were certain that it was our fault. So it's that rational brain versus the emotional brain, that's battling back and forth. Yeah, I definitely know what that feels like. And again, just kind of giving yourself permission to not be perfect, and we can't catch everything, and just do the best with the knowledge of what you have in front of you. Christine says it's helped to speak with her vet and get a sense of how this illness actually presents. It's often caught too late, and vet's office is very supportive. So that's a great suggestion or insight, Christine, and something that maybe would help Becky as well. But just knowing that sometimes there really is nothing you can do.
I think too, following up later with the vet, because it's so emotional right then that sometimes you can't even, you're hearing what they're saying, but you're not really. You're in such a state of emotion that you can't catch everything. That sometimes, or researching online or things like that, when after the feelings have at least calmed down to a point where you can really hear what somebody else is telling you or saying.
Right,
so.
right. Adele says she's lost her dog Alfie, who was attacked, and she's never known grief like that, and that's got to be just awful. We've had neighbors that have lost a dog to a fox, another one that's lost a dog to a coyote. So things just out of the blue. That's hard too, because almost with an old age or with an illness, even if it comes on sudden, your brain can kind of make sense of it, but getting hit by a car or being stolen out of the backyard, or it runs away, your dog runs away and you never see it again. That's a whole different kind of grief. It's difficult to get beyond. So,
And in this Adele situation, which I'm so very sorry for, it's a traumatic grief.
yeah.
As we talk about euthanasia, we can talk about giving them a peaceful death, and this is just traumatic. It wasn't expected. It can be hard, and you worried about what the dog went through. And sometimes that's a good one to talk with somebody else about, just to process those feelings. And he was a young dog too, just almost 2 years old. So yeah, because that's a traumatic loss, and trauma just does different things to us. So if you're in that situation, I really encourage you to talk with a counselor, get some feedback that can really help you with that, because it is a hard thing.
Yeah. So one of the other things, might sound small, or at least to me it sounds small, but I know in both cases, losing Daisy and Clover, I remember the first time I laughed after they had passed, and I caught myself in that laughter for whatever it was that made me smile or made me feel good. And I immediately felt guilty for being happy in that moment, because I was still devastated at the loss. So that's another guilt that we place on ourselves, is just kind of feeling guilty that we're moving on, like that there are even things inside us like that want to move on, even though rationally I want to hold on to this sadness. I don't want to let it go, because I feel like then I'm letting my dog go, from our memory or from my past. So yeah, that's another guilt that we can feel.
But if you think about it, for a lot of us, when we are sad, that's when our dog comes and snuggles up to us, or they're right beside us, and it's like they know. And I can't imagine that they would want us to be sad for the rest of our lives, because dogs, they may be scared little fellas or timid little girls, but their hearts are so big. And so I think sometimes to give the permission and the blessing that, yes, it's okay, that the fact that you are moving on in your life, and that you're having fun and you're laughing, and at some point thinking about another dog, it doesn't erase Clover from your life, and it doesn't erase everything that she brought to you.
Right, for sure.
I know. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want to respond to what Adele wrote, of that she's been on chemo for 3 years and her dog kept her going. That's another hard piece, that sometimes they play such a huge supportive role in our lives. And, I'd encourage you just to think about Alfie still being with you in spirit, and still encouraging you in spirit, and any reminders that you have of him to, let him pull for you from the Rainbow Bridge, and that connection. I really believe that connection that we have isn't broken by death. So he's still hanging out there with you, and he's still encouraging you on.
Absolutely. And we are as well. You have our support. Hillary, you were going to say something?
Yeah, just kind of talking about the moving on without them conversation, and for me it hit me watching, because we lost Tatum, and then watching Leon go through that grief of trying to help him, and it was just so powerful. But I think that helped me a little bit because I knew, well, we can't be so, it's not helping him to move past it either. But one of the things that really hit me was once I finally thought I was ready for another dog and had kind of given myself the time to grieve and heal and realized, yep, it's time. It was after I got Lulu that those feelings of guilt started popping back up again because I would like, there are certain, pet names and little nicknames and things like that that we would call Tatum that I would sometimes accidentally call Lulu. And just like immediately after it gets out of your mouth, you have that sort of weight of the guilt of, I'm not trying to, you want to kind of keep like a memorial for Tatum.
Right.
And I'm still dealing with like, okay, it's okay to feel good about all of it, but it's definitely one of the ones that can trigger me is like those little things with Lulu that remind me of Tatum and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times we'd call Clover Daisy,
Yeah.
when we first got her. And even just bringing her home that first day, she looked like, at least her head looks like a miniature Daisy. And it was just, it's just, yeah, there's like a blender full of emotions.
Yep.
Just, one will trigger another, which triggers another, which triggers another. And, but yeah, it's.
Well, and I also, because I'd catch myself almost do it, and then my husband would slip up and say one of Tatum. So then I'd snap at him, and I'd feel guilty for that. Like that's not fair either. She's not Tatum, because I wanted Lulu to have her own autonomous relationship with us too. So it's just this weird kind of combination of, like you say, a blender of all the emotions that are added in there.
I think with the new dogs and kind of moving on, and certainly with other dogs or your current dogs, I think just kind of focusing in on their personality, because all of them are so different. I think that helps. So, yeah.
And for me, kind of remembering Tatum wouldn't care a bit. That's kind of important to, like, that was her personality. She was so easygoing and so, like she wouldn't care a bit. She wouldn't have even noticed that you did
it. Well, and a number of times we kept saying Daisy brought Clover to us, I mean, Daisy was snuggly when she was younger, but as she grew up, she became more independent. She was still a little love bug, but definitely much more independent than Clover. And I think just from Clover's experiences before we got her, she was very snuggly. She always used to snuggle. And that was one of the things we loved about doing with Daisy. And when you miss your dog, like that's the one thing you want to do is just snuggle with them. And they're not there. And so we got this like miniature. Now she looks completely different than Daisy. So we weren't trying to, replace Daisy in any way, but her facial, beagles, they all kind of have a similar look. So at least Clover's beagle markings looked on her face really much like Daisy. So it felt like, although we had Clover and she had her own personality and everything, we kind of felt some love coming from Daisy through her, which was kind of an interesting thing. So if we called her Daisy or if we thought she looked like Daisy, we were like, well, maybe Daisy brought her to us. Maybe that was why she ended up in our life.
I think we love these critters so much that we want to do everything perfectly. We want to get it all right. And we just can't do that because we're not perfect. And so, we're going to mess something up or everything's not going to be perfect. And that's okay because, dogs, they certainly don't demand perfection from us.
No, in fact, they're more forgiving than people are. So,
yeah.
You could step on their toe by mistake and go, oh my gosh, and then they're licking you in the face, So I'm sorry, my foot was in your way. You know, I was like, no, 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 I'm sorry, I stepped on your toe. They're phenomenal. I love dogs. They're just amazing. They're definitely a blessing. So I guess one of the other things that we could talk about when it comes to guilt is, and my sister-in-law had to go through this, was, you know, she got the call. She was out of town. The pet sitter called and said that there was an emergency at home and her dog was not well, and that they ended up having to put her dog down. So that's another just heart-wrenching guilt, I'm sure.
And it goes back to what I was just saying about doing things perfectly.
Yeah.
The upside is we've become a lot more sensitive to issues around death and euthanasia, and vets have more memorial practices, whether it's the paw print or whatever.
Right.
But it also sets us up a little bit that we feel like if we don't get the whole routine, then we failed, and if we didn't do it right. And not being able to say goodbye to them. You can talk to your dog at any time. Yeah, the benefits of hand-free phones and cars is you can talk to yourself and nobody thinks you're crazy anymore because they just assume that you're talking to somebody on the phone. So don't do this in the car, but you can talk to your dog at any time and, I miss you. I'm so sorry I didn't get to say goodbye to you. Sometimes we just can't do it the way we want to do it. And we just have to kind of trust the process and trust what the people who are there are telling us.
Right.
And we do the best we can.
For sure. And what makes it worse is then as we're trying to deal with our own guilt or grief, just having other people say or do things that make us feel guilty about not being there or about situations at hand or that we extended a dog's life that for somebody who would never think to do that, that kind of thing. It's difficult when other people kind of try to make you feel guilty as well.
Yeah, and I think you just have to say to yourself, if not to them, you're not inside my skin. You don't know what the situation was. I actually had a friend who had to put her otherwise healthy dog down because there was just a screw loose in his brain.
Yeah.
And she went through all of the training and training camps and trainers coming into the home and had dogs and cats, and he just was not a safe dog. Something would snap in him, and she had to put him down. And she said walking into that vet office with a seemingly healthy dog, she just felt enormously guilty.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. The other people there, they didn't know that she had gone to the ends of the earth, and they didn't know the history.
Yeah.
We have to just judge by, again, we do the very best we can.
For sure. And Christine is so sweet. Daisy would definitely want Flo and you and Layla to have good lives. So those momentary guilts, where you're enjoying your other dogs, that's all our dogs want from us is to be happy and carefree. And so I think trying to get back to that, whether you have a dogs still or you don't, I think is in a way helps to honor their memory by finding joy in life again, because that's what they would want. So I guess I know we've heard lots from folks. Is there anything else that anyone has found yourself feeling guilty about, or that you've known others to feel guilty about as it relates to the loss of their dog? We've had a really, really good discussion today, so thank you for participating. And before we kind of move on to the next phase of the topic. I just wanted to make sure we caught any last comments from anybody. I know one of the things we've kind of identified a ton of types of guilt. I'm sure there's a ton more. How damaging is it, Peggy, to hold on to that guilt? I mean,
Well, what it does is when we hold on to it, it keeps us stuck in that place. It keeps us from having the freedom to go ahead and live our lives and to be happy. I think the function of guilt is to look at it really honestly and maybe even talk through it with a friend if you need some other perspective. If you're so mired in the guilt, you can't really see another perspective. But to look at, okay, realistically, is there anything we could have done differently? What do I need to learn from this? I have a friend whose husband backed over their dog, just didn't realize he was out in a hurry, in a rush, and it was horrible for them. But in that case, you look at it and go, okay, I always need to be aware. Dogs are around. Don't assume the dog's not out there.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything that we could have done differently? Lots of times there's not. And then to let that go. And when it comes up, to tell yourself, sometimes even to do a physical thing. Adele has a great comment here. You can't heal if you keep picking a wound. Absolutely right. And it comes a point sometimes, I think, when we hold on to so much guilt, we actually start dishonoring the memory of our dogs, because our dogs were about bringing us joy and love and happiness. And when we keep focusing on that's not what their lives were about.
Yeah. Doesn't it feel like, though, if you hold on to that guilt, if you can spiral into a routine that doesn't allow you to grow and move on beyond it, right? I mean, and it affects so much else in your life. It's not just because when you feel guilty, that's a very self-consuming feeling, right? Almost nothing else matters, at least in that moment, other than how guilty you might feel or how negative or down about yourself or shame that you might feel. And it impacts so much else in our lives when we won't let that go.
Well, another thing it affects is when you're consumed by guilt, you don't feel like you can bring another dog into your home. It's like, oh, I can't do that. I did such a horrible job. And so you're actually depriving another dog of having a wonderful life with you.
I kind of think I picture it almost like ruts on a gravel road or something like that. Like you just keep on running through that part that, even though it feels terrible, it starts to become so ingrained, or like a hamster wheel where it's just you keep on spinning and spinning and spinning. And it's really hard to, like, if that hamster wheel is going fast enough, it's really hard to pop out. And I think once you sort of take that first little step to kind of divert that thinking, and for me, it's usually about gratitude and trying to find something that you can kind of, whether it may be doing something in your dog's honor. So supporting a charity or donating to something, but in your dog's memory, that might help to kind of divert that kind of circular thinking that's been keeping you stuck in the same.
Focusing outside yourself, I think, is a great thing to do.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No. Go ahead, Peggy.
In counseling, we talk about something called thought stopping, and it's, if you keep thinking the same thing, it's going to be easier to think that thing. So if you're mired in the guilt, as you were saying, Hillary, to actually stop and catch yourself. wait, what am I doing? I'm beating myself up with guilt. Does that help me? No, it doesn't. So now I need to shift my thoughts. Let me focus on gratitude, or let me focus on giving back. And the more you do that, the easier it becomes to shift to those more positive thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there is something to be learned from feeling guilt. I think there's growth in pain, but you also have to recognize that at some point you're going to stop growing and you're going to revert. So acknowledge, is there anything more that I can learn from this? And if not, it's time to move, which most likely not. It's time to move on. It's time to, I always think about, focusing on your other pets or other people's pets, pet sitting for somebody else, or kind of opening your heart to people in need, or if there aren't any pets or people that you feel comfortable opening up to, or giving of yourself to, there's always the plant world. There's gardening, just spending time, whether it's planting new life and nurturing it and watching it grow through the seasons, or creating a memorial for your dog, a special place in your backyard, place that you can go and read or contemplate the life that you had with your dog. I think those things are always really helpful to do.
And kind of along that line is working with your hands can kind of stop a little bit of that circular thinking that's been going on, so you can kind of divert that thinking that way too. So just, whether it's focusing on crafting or, like you said, gardening, or something that you can get your hands dirty, get your hands working, it can kind of help you re-trigger some different thoughts.
That's a great point, because I know even when I've felt sick, I've had an illness or something, I know, like, needlework or embroider, like things that require attention to detail, help me take my brain off of me not feeling well, and then I can put it onto something else. And then you have something, if you like working with your hands, you have something, building birdhouses or whatever it might be, you have something to show for it when you're done, which is also gives you a good feeling, right? When you have something you can see.
So with that in mind, is there anything out there to those of you watching or in the comments, if you'd like to share anything that's worked well for you to kind of help with that, or some ideas that you think could be helpful for somebody that's kind of going through this, to help trigger a different thought pattern or kind of keep yourself busy? What is some of those things?
I would love to hear that. Yeah. If anyone's planted a memorial garden, or done anything different, or spent more time, Christine, with your two other pups. So, just any of those kinds of things would be great. I know it would be helpful. And if you're listening to this in the replay, please feel free to add your comments too, because we read and respond to all of them. So that would be helpful. And for anybody else that wants to gain insight from your experiences, that would be great.
Dell says she's been obsessed with knitting.
Oh, that's a perfect
example. That's a perfect thing.
Perfect. Yeah. As long as you don't beat yourself up for missing a stitch or doing all those kind of things, then you don't want to get to the point where you're frustrated doing it. You want to work with your hands where you can just let it go and forgive.
Cleaning out closets has always been.
Oh, yeah.
That there's something about just letting go of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And being able to donate, giving to charities and things that you're no longer using, that always warms your heart, right? That's a good thing. We, when both Daisy and Clover died, we ended up having things to donate that were theirs, whether they be blankets or leftover food, unopened or anything like that. That made us feel good that in their honor we could share or help other pups as well.
Christine talks about focusing on external things. Has helped her. Donations to vet research, involvement with the Beagle Rescue Group, even writing thank you notes to the surgeon who operated on Daisy. And I really want to highlight that last one, of writing a thank you note to your vet. They are under just extraordinary stress these days. It's a profession that's really struggling, and they come to love our animals just as much as we do. And it can be hard for them. It can be really, really tough for them when they have to um, put an animal down that they have cared for and fought for, and tried to keep healthy, tried to do everything they could. So I think it's a really lovely thing to just reach out to them and send a thank you note and just say thank you for everything.
Yeah, we absolutely love our vets and vet techs and groomers and everybody at the veterinary clinic. They just, I kept telling them throughout all of Clover's treatments and everything, they're just an extended part of our family. You know, they care about Clover as much as we do. So absolutely. Yeah, that's so sweet, Christine. Thank you for that. That's hugely helpful.
So before we move on, are there any other questions that you might have for Peggy, or anything that you'd like to mention about this particular topic before we move forward?
Yeah, I think we're kind of wrapping up. So if anybody, now's your chance. If you have a question for Peggy before we go.
And as folks are thinking about that, I just wanted to say again, this can be a really tough topic, and it kind of cuts at the places that carry or hurt a lot. But again, to focus on all of the love that you gave to your dog, whether it was for a week or 14 years, and all of the love that your dog gave back to you. And that's the real measure. It's not the perfection. It's not getting everything right. It's not never missing anything. It's that you had a heart connection. And in my book, that's about as good as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
So to really hold that and celebrate that.
I think that's a beautiful sentiment. That's great. So Christine says she'll be doing a fundraising climb this Saturday for World Wildlife Federation. That's fantastic. Hang in there, Christine. We know you won't be struggling. You'll be fine. You'll be great. Be
Daisy will be going a few steps up ahead of you.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So I also wanted to mention, as a little reminder, we are putting the final touches on a special book that Peggy's written that's How to Heal from the Loss of Your Dog. And that'll be available to our We Heart Hounds audience for free. That'll be available shortly. So we're just putting some of the final touches there. And then if people would like to reach out to you, Peggy, for more information, how would you like them to go about that?
They can email me at peggy@peggyhaymes.com. That's HAYMES. Or my website is heartcallings.com.
Perfect. And we'll be sure to put links to that in the replay as well. So if anybody needs that, or in the comment section. We'll do that for everybody. Well, thank you, everybody. It's really been a pleasure having everyone here, and I can't thank you enough for opening up. It's it's a tough topic. It's hard to open up about it and feel all those yucky feelings. Really, truly, I think if we allow ourselves to feel, then we do allow ourselves to heal. So I know it sounds silly and maybe oversimplified, but I really believe it. And I think that's what's truly immeasurable about having Peggy here and having these conversations, is getting everybody that opportunity to do so as a group, right? Because we all know, we're all familiar with and have gone through this together. So it's nice to be able to kind of support one another through our journey. So thank you so much for being here. We look forward to seeing you next week, Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here again. If you'd like to tune in, we'll be talking about kind of all those other feelings beyond grief, or outside of grief. I'm sorry, outside of guilt. And those would be things like sadness, anger, feeling lost, those types of things. So we'll be talking about that. And I don't know, Peggy, did you have any last comments?
No, I really appreciate everyone's conversation today. This has been great.
Yeah, it has been. And Christine, we're so looking forward to getting you the book. It's very special. Peggy's put some special touches to it just for the We Heart Hounds family. So it's not available anywhere else. So we're really excited about getting that to you. And we will let you know when that's available. We're working on it, and hopefully it'll be available to everybody soon. So anyway, thank you so much. We really, truly hope you enjoyed our episode today, our session, and I hope you're starting to feel some of that healing love and support from across the miles. So thanks so much. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.